In the 1920s, schools in America introduced a new kind of grade. It wasn't for math, it wasn't for science or history, it was for something called social adjustment. Imagine you were a child back then. You loved to learn, you were great at your subjects, but during recess, instead of running around and screaming with the other kids, you prefer to sit under a large oak tree and read a book. You aren't sad, you aren't lonely, you are perfectly happy in your own world. But then your report card comes home. Your parents see straight A's in every subject, but at the bottom there is a failing grade in adjustment. Your teacher tells your parents, "He is too serious, he doesn't play with the others, we are worried he isn't normal." Overnight, your peace became a problem. Your quiet nature was no longer seen as a sign of intelligence, it was seen as a sign of failure. The system decided that if you weren't joining the herd, you were broken. That was the moment the world turned against the loner. And if you are a quiet person today, you are still feeling the effects of that report card.
Welcome. If you're watching this, chances are you felt that pressure before. You've been at a job where they talk about culture and team building, but all you want to do is put your headphones on and do your work. You've been to family gatherings where people ask, "Why are you so quiet?" like you're keeping a secret from them. You aren't being difficult. You aren't being rude. You are just a person who recharges in the quiet. But for the last 100 years, the world has been told a lie. We've been told that being loud is the same thing as being confident, and being quiet is the same thing as being weak. Today, we're going to look at the history of how this happened. We're going to go back to the early 1900s, a time when the world was shifting from the peaceful countryside to the noisy city. We're going to see how the loner went from being a respected figure to someone society tried to fix. But most importantly, we're going to see how the quiet ones fought back. Before the 1900s, life was much slower. Most people lived on farms or in very small villages. In that world, nobody expected you to be a performer. If you were a blacksmith or a farmer and you didn't talk much, people didn't think you were weird. They thought you were steady. They thought you were a man of character. Character was the most important word in the 1800s. It meant, who are you when no one is looking? Are you honest? Are you reliable? A man could be completely silent for 50 years, and as long as he did his job and kept his word, he was seen as a pillar of the community. But as we moved into the 1900s, everything changed. People moved into the cities. Suddenly, you weren't surrounded by people who had known your family for generations. You were surrounded by thousands of strangers. You didn't have time to show people your character anymore. You had to show them your personality. You had to be magnetic. You had to be charming. You had to sell yourself in the first 10 seconds of meeting someone. This was the birth of the extrovert ideal. The world stopped valuing what you were on the inside and started valuing how much noise you could make on the outside. Let's look at where most people spent their time: the workplace. The early 1900s was the era of the giant factory, thousands of people working in one room. It was loud, it was hot, and it was crowded. If you were a loner back then, the factory was your nightmare. Not just because of the noise of the machines, but because of the social machine. This was the time when managers started to get obsessed with morale. They started to believe that if workers didn't do everything together, they wouldn't be productive. They created company baseball teams. They had mandatory company sing-alongs. They had picnics where you were expected to bring your whole family and mingle. There's a story of a man named Joseph, a master mechanic in a 1920s car factory. He was the best at his job. He could hear a tiny click in an engine and know exactly what was wrong. But Joseph didn't like the company picnics. He didn't want to play baseball. During lunch, he would sit in the back of the shop, alone, eating a sandwich and drawing diagrams. His manager eventually pulled him aside. He didn't tell Joseph he was doing a bad job. He told him, "The men think you're stuck up. You aren't a team player. If you don't start coming to the social club, we're going to have to let you go." To the manager, Joseph was a loose gear. He didn't mesh with the others. The factory didn't want a genius. It wanted a neighbor. This happens today too, doesn't it? We call it cultural fit. It's the modern way of saying, we don't care how good you are at your job. We care if you're fun at the office party. Outside of work, the pressure didn't stop. In the early 1900s, neighborhoods were designed around the front porch. On a summer evening, every single person in the neighborhood was expected to sit outside and talk to the people walking by. If you were the person who kept your curtains closed, if you were the person who liked to take long walks alone in the woods instead of sitting on the porch, people got suspicious. The newspapers back then started writing stories about the dangerous recluse. They told people to watch out for the neighbor who kept to himself. They said that solitude was where bad ideas were born. They were trying to shame people into being social. They wanted everyone to be out in the open, where they could be seen and heard. They were afraid of the mystery of the quiet person. But while the neighbors were whispering, the loners were finding their own secret doors to freedom. The smart loners of the 1900s realized they couldn't change the world, so they found jobs that the loud people hated. They became night watchmen. Imagine the peace of that job in 1910. The city is asleep. The factory is quiet. You have 12 hours of silence. You are paid to watch the moon and think your own thoughts. To an extrovert, this was a lonely nightmare. To a loner, it was a promotion to heaven. They became lighthouse keepers. They lived on rocks in the middle of the ocean. They did a vital job, saving lives, but they did it in total solitude. They were respected by the world, but they didn't have to talk to the world. They became researchers and librarians. They spent their days in the stacks, the deep, quiet basements of libraries where the air smelled like old paper. They were the ones who actually kept the world's information organized, while everyone else was out in the streets shouting. They found a way to be essential without being loud. They let the personality people have the porches and the baseball teams. The loners took the nights, the libraries, and the sea.
As the 1900s moved deeper into the century, the pressure on the quiet ones didn't just come from bosses or neighbors, it started coming from the doctors. In the 1920s and 30s, a new idea became popular in psychology. This was the era where normalcy became an obsession. Doctors started to believe that being a shut-in wasn't just a personality trait, they started to treat it as a medical warning sign. Imagine being a young woman named Clara in the year 1924. Clara's smart, she's gentle, and she's a wonderful artist, but Clara finds the new jazz-age culture exhausting. She doesn't want to go to the crowded, smoky speakeasies. She doesn't want to engage in the fast, witty banter that everyone else seems to love. She prefers to spend her evenings in her garden or painting by the light of a single lamp. In the 1800s, Clara would have been called thoughtful, but in 1924, her parents are reading magazine articles that tell them reclusiveness is a symptom of a mental breakdown. They take Clara to a clinic. The doctor doesn't ask Clara if she is happy. He doesn't care that she produced 3 beautiful paintings that week. He asks her, "Clara, why don't you want to be popular? Why are you afraid of the crowd?" When Clara explains that she isn't afraid, but simply prefers the quiet, the doctor sighs. He writes down the word maladjusted on her chart. In the medical journals of the time, they actually described the shut-in personality as a danger to the nation. They believed that if people were allowed to think for themselves in solitude, they might become uncontrollable. They wanted social hygiene. They wanted everyone to be a good mixer. Clara was likely prescribed a regimen of activity. This was a real medical practice. Loners were told to force themselves into social situations until their shyness was broken. It was like a form of social boot camp. If you didn't enjoy the party, the doctor told you to stay longer. If you felt drained by small talk, the doctor told you to talk more. Can you imagine the mental exhaustion? To be told by the highest authorities in the world that your very nature, your need for peace, is a sickness. This is where the guilt of the modern loner was born. Even today, 100 years later, when you decide to stay home on a Saturday night, there's a tiny voice in the back of your head that says, "Is there something wrong with me?" That voice isn't yours. It's the ghost of a 1920s doctor who didn't understand that silence is a form of health.
But while the doctors were busy trying to fix the quiet ones, the people who were actually changing the world were doing the exact opposite. They were building fortresses around their solitude. If you ever feel like your quietness makes you less than, look at the giants of history. They didn't succeed despite being loners. They succeeded because they were loners. Take Nikola Tesla. By the 1930s, Tesla lived a life that most people would call lonely. He lived in the Hotel New Yorker, room 3327. He had very few close friends. He ate his dinner every night at exactly 8:10 p.m., alone at a specific table. The newspapers mocked him. They called him the mad scientist. They said he was withdrawn from reality. But Tesla wasn't withdrawn from reality. He was focused on a deeper reality.
Tesla understood something that the good mixers of the 1920s would never understand. He said, "The mind is sharper and keener in seclusion and uninterrupted solitude. Originality thrives in seclusion, free of outside influences beating upon us to cripple the creative mind. Be alone, that is the secret of invention. Be alone, that is when ideas are born." Tesla knew that the noise of society, the gossip, the fashion, the social pressure, was like static on a radio. If you wanted to hear the music of the universe, you had to turn the static off. He didn't hate people. He just valued the light of an idea more than the light of a ballroom. Then there is the story of Albert Einstein. In the early 1900s, Einstein worked in a patent office in Bern, Switzerland. It was a humble, quiet job. His co-workers thought he was just a nice, quiet man who was maybe a bit too focused on his papers.
But Einstein loved that job. Why? Because it was boring and solitary. It didn't require him to perform or sell himself. Because his social energy wasn't being drained by office politics or a high-pressure social life, his brain had massive amounts of energy left over to think about the nature of time and space. Imagine if Einstein had been a good mixer in the 1920 sense. Imagine if he spent his nights at jazz clubs and his days networking. We might never have had the theory of relativity. The world gained a universe because one man had the courage to be monotonous. He said, "I am a horse for a single harness, not cut out for tandem or teamwork." For such an isolated person, the experience of being lonely is painful, but in the years of maturity, it is delicious. Einstein and Tesla were the ultimate unadjusted men. They refused to wear the chalk mark of society. They showed us that the loner isn't a shut-in who is hiding. The loner is an architect who is building.
It wasn't just the famous geniuses. The early 1900s was full of quiet heroes who used their solitude to protect the things that mattered. Think of the archives of the great cities. In the 1910s and 20s, as the world became faster and more obsessed with the new, it was the quiet, solitary librarians and archivists who saved our history. Imagine a woman named Eleanor. She is a librarian in a dusty basement in London. The world outside is shouting about the newest cars and the newest movies, but Eleanor spends her days in the silence, cataloging the wisdom of the past. Society calls her a spinster. They pity her for her quiet life. But Eleanor is the one who remembers. She is the keeper of the flame. Without the Eleanors of the world, the people who were happy to stay in the shadows and do the deep, quiet work, our culture would have no roots. Think of the fire lookouts of the early 1900s. These were men and women who lived in tiny glass cabins on top of mountains for months at a time. Their only job was to watch, to observe, to be still. To an extrovert, this job was a prison sentence, but these lookouts were the guardians of the forests. They developed a mountain mind, a state of peace that people in the cities couldn't even imagine. They lived in a world of eagles, thunderstorms, and starlight. They were the first to see the smoke, because they were the only ones quiet enough to notice the change in the air. These people, the archivists, the lookouts, the night watchmen, they were the silent infrastructure of the world. They proved that you don't have to be the loudest voice in the room to be the most important person in the room.
We must be honest, though. Choosing this path in the early 1900s came with a cost. It wasn't always a peaceful retreat. For many, it was a battle against a world that wanted to consume them.
The 1920s was the era of the groupthink. If you didn't join the local lodge, the local church, or the local political club, you were viewed with suspicion. This was especially true for those who didn't fit the traditional mold. There was a man named Arthur, a quiet accountant in a small Midwestern town in 1932. Arthur was the most honest man in the county. He did everyone's taxes perfectly. But Arthur didn't want to go to the weekly town dances. He didn't want to sit on the sidewalk and gossip. The town rewarded his honesty by giving him their work, but they punished him with their words. They called him cold. They called him strange. When a crime happened in town, the first person the police questioned was always the man who lived alone. Why? Because to the herd, the person who doesn't need the herd is a threat. Arthur lived his life with a constant weight on his shoulders, the weight of being different. But Arthur stayed true to himself. He realized that the gossip of the town was like the wind. It would blow past him as long as his own foundation was solid. He died with a library of 3,000 books and a mind that had traveled the world, while the people who gossiped about him never left the county.
Now we come to the most important part of the story, your part. For 100 years, the culture of personality has been a giant hammer trying to beat us into the same shape. It told us that we needed to be open, social, and vibrant at all times. But look at the world around you right now. The hammer is starting to break. We are living in an era of extreme noise. Between social media, constant notifications, and the 24-hour news cycle, the world is louder than it has ever been. And because the world is so loud, it is becoming exhausted. People are stressed, they are anxious, and they are losing their ability to focus. And suddenly, the loner isn't a patient to be cured. The loner is a leader.
In the 1920s, the world needed people who could work on assembly lines. But in 2026, the world needs people who can think. Think about the skills that come naturally to you as a quiet person. Deep focus. While everyone else is distracted by 1,000 pings on their phone, you have the ability to sit with a thought for an hour. Observation. Because you aren't talking, you are seeing the things that others miss. You see the trends before they happen. Self-reliance. You don't need a team-building retreat to feel motivated. You have an internal engine that runs on its own fuel. The very things that the early 1900s tried to label as maladjustment are now your superpowers. The culture of personality is dying. We are entering a new culture of depth. People are tired of the shiny, the fake, and the loud. They are looking for the steady. They are looking for the quiet lighthouse. They are looking for you. You don't need to fix your introversion. You don't need to force yourself to be a good mixer. You just need to realize that you are the descendant of the people who kept the lights burning when the rest of the world was in a panic. We have traveled from the crowded halls of Ellis Island to the quiet hotel room of Nikola Tesla. We have seen the chalk marks of suspicion and the failing grades in adjustment. But we have also seen the truth. The loner is the one who holds the world together when it gets too loud. History tried to shame you. It tried to tell you that your peace was a problem, but history was wrong. Your solitude is not a prison, it is a sanctuary. Your silence is not a void, it is a reservoir of energy. Your X on your shoulder is not a mark of defect, it is a mark of sovereignty. So tomorrow, when the world tries to drag you into the noise, when your phone screams for your attention, when people ask you why you're so quiet, I want you to remember Eleanor in the library. I want you to remember Einstein in the patent office. I want you to remember the lighthouse keeper on the rock. You don't owe the world your noise. You owe the world your light. And your light only burns steady when the air is still. You are in good company. You are part of a lineage that goes back centuries. You are the quiet strength that the world has always needed, even when it didn't know it. So take a deep breath. Enjoy the silence of your room. Enjoy the thoughts in your head. You have fought a 100-year war just to be yourself, and you have won. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being quiet. If this journey through the history of the loner felt like home to you, then stay with us. We have many more stories to tell and many more silences to explore. Subscribe to our channel for more content. There are no loud meetings, just deep ideas. Stay quiet, stay peaceful, stay you.